Yeah, good news. Look at this inventory falling. The price increase is actually working. The inventory of every single model in the United States of America is falling, and it's falling quickly. And it looks even better if you combine the inventory into just one chart. Europe is coming down too, although not as fast. And for the Model Y, I expect either a backlog coming back or price increases in the US, more likely price increases. And we have more good news for Tesla stock today. We'll get through everything. On May 3rd, a Chinese publication learned from a Tesla store sales consultant in Beijing as a consumer that the number of people who ordered cars after the price increase specifically increased a lot, basically. I can't find the original source, but I mean, it checks out. Look at the US and Europe. China is probably the same thing. Tesla has done this before, but we didn't really see the effects of that small price increase to be this effective. I think partially that is because this time the prices are so low already, especially in the US, that it just makes sense for people to pull the trigger if there is indication that the prices are probably perhaps not going down anymore in the short term. The good news do not stop here. There's more. Tesla has just resumed orders for the Model 3 long-range all-wheel drive in the US. Tesla's pricing makes sense, $47,000 for the long range, which would be $3,000 less than the Model Y long range. Right now, if you look at the Model Y performance, it is $54,000, and the specs, well, they are fairly comparable to the Model 3 performance. Model 3 performance is only $1,000 less. You do get a bit more range of just a few miles more, and you do get a slightly faster car, but no big difference really. I don't know. Why would anyone really want to go with the Model 3 in this case instead of a Model Y, unless you specifically really want a sedan instead of an SUV? But there is a lot of debate about the Model 3 long range because it says that the range is 325 miles plus. Gary expects this Model 3 trim, all-wheel drive, long range, to quickly become the Model 3 best-selling trim, and I agree with that. But I'm not sure about this point here. Gary thinks that the long-range Model 3 likely uses the same LFP battery pack found in the Model 3 rear-wheel drive, since the EV credit will be $3,750, the same as the Model 3 rear-wheel drive. The Model 3 rear-wheel drive, the battery pack is already filled fully. There's no more space to add more batteries as far as we know it, at least until now, there wasn't. What's more likely is that Tesla is using new batteries from CATL, which were called M3P batteries. That would certainly be plausible, but I think it's actually not likely because we would have seen that implemented in Giga Shanghai first. So you would have seen ranges of Model 3s and Model Ys in Giga Shanghai increase, but we have not seen that. So it wouldn't make sense for Tesla to implement that battery in the US first instead of in China. I think it is much more likely that Tesla is using 2170 cells and is getting these cells from one of the countries with a free trade agreement. Tesla is definitely not using cells from its Nevada factory because then the Model 3 long range would get the full $7,500 EV tax credit. It only gets half of it. However, it is a little bit muddy here. Check this out. The new Model 3 long range is the same weight as the previous 2170 long range, but 33 fewer miles of range, except we don't know if it actually has 33 less miles because Tesla just says 325 miles plus. We would expect a higher weight battery for LFP if the battery was bigger than 2170. LFP batteries, by the way, are heavier, less energy dense, but you can charge them to 100% every single time without doing any damage to the battery, basically. And also they don't catch on fire as often. This might mean the battery is under 82 kilowatt hours, meaning it gets 53 more miles than the standard range Model 3 with under 22 kilowatt hour larger battery and one additional drivetrain. could be LFP or M3P at this stage, meaning a new type of LFP battery from CATL. If I had to guess, says Tesla economist, perhaps a 75 kilowatt hour LFP battery, which is a world record range and performance for an LFP battery of that size. And of course, LFP batteries are cheaper than the regular 2170 nickel-based batteries that Tesla would normally use. I think by far 2170s are the most likely. I would give it a very low chance it is this battery. Why send these batteries to the US instead of using them in China first? The Model Y long-range all-wheel drive has 330 miles. I think Tesla is intentionally keeping this lower than 330 miles because the production capacity in North America is 110,000 per quarter for the Model Y and 56,000 per quarter for the Model 3. They don't want the Model 3 to beat the Model Y. The old Model 3 long range, by the way, used to have 358 miles. We don't have an EPA range yet. Troy says Tesla can deliver this car before the EPA score is probably because it's needed for the window sticker, which is required to sell cars. Maybe they didn't want buyers to switch to this car now. Troy also thinks that it is probably 2170 cells and not LFP cells. The Tesla economist says that he thinks the cells come from China because I assume what he's saying is that if they did come from Korea, Tesla would get the full $7,500 tax credit. But what if these battery minerals that are in these batteries come from China, for example? Then Tesla would only get the $3,750 credit, not the full credit. The speed of a Model 3 long range, it used to be 4.2 seconds before this came back, and it remains unchanged right now. Supposedly, the weight is also exactly the same, which is a bit strange. Also, is it possible that Tesla is using 4680 batteries and perhaps also the rear casting, the front casting, and the structural battery pack, which would help with the cost overall long term, certainly. But Troy thinks that the current Model 3 long range is not using the 4680 cells because they have less energy density as of right now and can be used for long range versions. Technically, is it possible that we could get this kind of range from LFP batteries, which are cheaper? And the answer is yes, it is possible. These batteries are higher density LFP packs, which could achieve this range in a Model 3, but Troy says no, this was never done. If it was possible, Giga Shanghai would be the first to do it because LFP is cheaper. I mean, it was never done with CATL's LFP cells, but the BYD Seal achieves the same range as the Model 3 long range with their own BYD LFP blade batteries. Here's a comparison for you to take a look. If we compare the Model 3 standard range, these are very similar. And then if we compare the Model 3 performance to the BYD Seal performance, it matches very closely. So it's possible, and if Tesla is doing that, that would be awesome. But then I would be scratching my head and wondering, why are you not doing that in China? In the US, sales for the most part are okay, but in China, the prices are quite a bit lower than in the US. For example, Troy estimates that the Model 3 standard range in China is very close, or pretty much is at 0% in terms of margins. If you can have a model the higher range at a relatively cheap price still, where you can have a higher margin than zero, I think it would make sense to focus on China first instead of the US maybe. Keep in mind that China gross margin is not zero overall. We're just talking about the Model 3 standard range, and there's no long range Model 3 in China. You don't have two options in China for the Model 3, although the Model Y does have a long range option in China. Once we have an EPA estimate for the range, we will know what is going on exactly, probably, or until someone actually takes the car apart and finds out exactly what's the chemistry of that battery. Until then, the only thing that we know 100% is that these batteries are not coming from the US. On the other hand, if Tesla is getting these LFP batteries from CATL, the new type of batteries, maybe it would make sense to launch that kind of product in the US first, because you just make so much more money per each vehicle sold because each vehicle sells at a much higher margin, and in China the margins are quite a bit lower. So it depends on what Tesla is trying to optimize for. If you want to optimize for market share and long-term destruction of competition, do that in China first. If you want to optimize for profits, especially shorter-term profits, and build up cash, which may also really help long term, then do that in the US first. Ford has posted its EV margins, although Elon praises Ford. Always tough with margins for new vehicle lines, especially when there are major technology shifts. I think Ford's overall strategy with EVs is smart. The electric F-150 Lightning has high demand. Meet Kevin says that the net EV income today for Ford is 40%. Minus 40%. I haven't gone through the full report from Ford yet, but if you look at Ford's EBIT margin, which is earnings before interest and taxes, you will see that it is minus 102%. Just so you understand what that means. If you sell a vehicle for $50,000, that means it costs you $100,000 to make that vehicle. Tesla stock is slightly green, and you may think it didn't go up pretty much at all. So nothing good is really happening. The market is not thinking that this is positive for Tesla stock. What's happening? Tesla's inventory goes down and Tesla brings back the long-range Model 3 in the US. This is obviously positive. Well, the markets are down today. So overall, Tesla did go up when you consider the overall market. It's a great day for Tesla stock today. The Fed raised interest rates today again, but it hinted at a possible pause. The Ford CEO said that the price cuts in the EV industry is a worrying trend. And of course, you won't be worried about interest rates if you are losing 102% already. You are not in a good position here. If you are Ford right now, which basically describes almost every legacy automaker. Today also something really interesting happened to me. I was walking in my neighborhood and I hear that a car is coming behind me, and naturally I hold my breath for about maybe 10 seconds because I don't want to breathe in toxic air. That gives me a headache actually, so I don't like going for walks downtown or just going downtown for any reason because I get headaches. So I hold my breath and then the car goes by and there's no toxic air. It was a Tesla and I smelled the future. I liked how that smelled. I was walking in the early morning, so you can still smell the flowers and the trees. It's a really nice day today in Vancouver here in Canada. If you like to support our channel, join Patreon. There's a link down below. This video explains why Tesla board members are now buying more Tesla stock. My name is Matt Pocius. Like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Oh, and I had a lot of responsibilities with my healthcare business today, so maybe only one video for today. Should be 2 videos tomorrow.